Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today is May 1st. It's Thursday, May 1st. Where has the first part of this year gone? For me, it has flown by like I was on a roller coaster. And if you know me, you know I don't do roller coasters. So for this to be May already, it must be flying by fast. I am Dr. Tanji Reed Marshall. Welcome to Let's Talk Power Live, where we talk about critical topics in education through the lens of power. I am the CEO and principal consultant of Liaison Educational Partners, where we partner with, support education entities, state departments of education, districts, schools, and individual classrooms to improve instruction, culture, and look at the representational balance of curriculum. We believe every student deserves an excellent education. And we're on a mission to make sure every student has a leader and a classroom educator that is equipped with the mindset, the skill set, and the resources to ensure that these young people get the excellent education they deserve. So that's what we do. And I'm excited that you are joining us today. Before we get started, I'm going to ask you to do four things. I'm going to ask you to hit the like button, going to ask you to subscribe to our channel. I'm going to ask you to leave us a comment, and I'm going to ask you to share this site with someone else. We want to build a community of people who are committed to ensuring every student gets the excellent education they deserve. So thank you for being here with me today. The other thing I want to talk about is it's Thursday. It's Thankful Thursday. I am thankful it is May, even though it got here faster than I thought it was going to get here, but the weather has been beautiful. I'm thankful for beautiful weather. I'm thankful for the opportunity to just be outside and get some natural vitamin D. What are you thankful for? Every week, I ask us to stop and think about what we're thankful for. So take a moment. What are you thankful for? All right. What you're seeing here is Liaison Educational Partner website. Please go ahead and get to our website. It is where you will learn about our organization, what we do, and how we can support the work of ensuring kids get an excellent education. So, what are we talking about today? Today, we're going to talk about data. Data is not the decision. We are in the thicket of testing. In fact, my daughter told me the other day, our grandson is doing his dibbles. He's in kindergarten. He's testing this whole week. Testing has started. We are in the middle of it. We are in the thick of it. But it is not the decision. And we want to talk over the next few weeks about using data to power instruction with clarity and confidence. There is data everywhere. We are inundated with data. Unfortunately, it is creating a drip. We are data rich, but we're information poor. So we're going to take the next few weeks to kind of dig into what this concept of being data rich, information poor is all about. But then we're going to talk about how we can drive this idea of using data and drive instruction and drive the culture in a way that is not so disruptive. I remember being in the classroom this time of year, anxiety was hard. The culture inside the building was beginning to fray because of how we as the adults handle this time of year. So we're going to spend some time digging into that. So looking forward to having you join us for the next few weeks. Actually, every day. Actually, not every day. Sorry, every week. Well, here we go. Let's ask this question. I ask it every week. Do you have your copy? I am the proud author of Understanding Your Instructional Power, Curriculum and Language Decisions to Support Each Student. This book is all about the power lens in education. This is the book that is the impetus for our conversations around power and authentic agency. And you should have it. Why should you have it? Because power is a real thing. It is not fake. It is not something that is left to the world outside of school. It is evident in how relationships operate. There are positional differences, there are authority based differences. Everyone has a different power principle and a power perspective. And through the activities I put together in this book, it will help you, number one, uncover your power principle, your personal power ideology. It's going to help you dig into that. It's going to also help you see areas where power is being misused and harmful to adults and students. And the number three, it's going to give you some strategies to move forward. I believe in strategies, but you have to have some background first. So in the book, we take some time to dig in historical factors. We look at ways in which power evolves, and then we get into strategies. A lot of times in education, because we're problem solvers, we tend to move towards action first, and then we wonder why our actions don't stick. We need to spend some time digging and understanding some underlying principles. In the book, we give you some underlying principles. Here is at the end of our time together, I'll help you get to the book as well. Here you go. There's a QR code right there. Please go ahead, scan the code, and get the book. Would love to be in conversation with you about it. In a liaison educational partners, we really deal with a 5-phase process of supporting our partners. We help people learn. We want to get into the idea of really understanding situations, problems, backstories, really getting into why a pain point is a pain point. Therefore, we focus first on learning. Then we move into that planning phase. We do a lot of learning, then we got to plan some stuff, right? We use what we learn to come up with a strategic plan for forward action. From there, we help people apply, really beginning strategic about setting up key performance indicators, how to apply the plan. We understand the importance of evaluation, stepping back to reflect. Therefore, we then move into a phase of evaluation where we can make critical decisions about what needs to stay and what needs to go. It is on a circle because the process is iterative. We use this process as a partnership phase because we understand that strategic movement and actual improvement is cyclical and it takes time. And we use this process to do that. And that is why we're talking about data today in a very real way. So, where have we been over the last month? We spent time really looking at data as a tool. In the current way, it's mostly used in a lot of places. We know that data can be used in ways that are harmful. We talked about instructional power, and we talked about data through the lens of instructional power, and discussed that instructional power and power itself is about relationships. It is about influence, whereas a lot of times it's used as a control mechanism. It really should be about the intentional development of relationships so that there is symbiosis, there is synergy, there is authentic agency building, particularly for young people. And the adult relationships are also intact. We also talked about how assessment can be an agency builder and not anxiety inducing. Unfortunately, we're at a point where assessment really is about not being partner, not sitting aside and learning, but really about sorting and putting young people on a conveyor belt of group identification. We put them on whether they are above average, quote unquote, or they're emerging in their development of understanding. We look at whether they are proficient, they are exemplary. We have all these wonderful adult terms that really create an environment of anxiety. My premise is assessment really should be an avenue for building agency and student learning ownership. There's a lot of language, there's a lot of research going forth, has gone forth, and will continue to go forth about the need to have student agency. What I have found and what others have found is student agency right now really involves what I have called as managed choice. We give young people choices that adults develop, and we ask them to choose from the options we give them. That isn't, number one, bad, because there are times when you must do that. However, it is not necessarily agency developing for the long term. Because what it does is it creates a space where a young person will always rely on somebody else to provide them options, as opposed to helping them build the creative and managerial muscles necessary to create their own options. And so managed choice has its place. But if we're talking about agency development, then we must begin to see it through a much broader, deeper, wider lens. And assessment is an avenue for that. We talked over the last few weeks about how assessments can do that. And I gave you a tool, and I'll probably make that tool available as well later on today or maybe next week. And then we talked about reflection as a power move, using reflective processes through assessment, as a result of assessment, as a power move that again strengthens the student understanding of themselves and their what they know and what they're able to do, and really brings them in as partners in the process. So that's where we've been. Where are we going? Well, we know it's testing season, and we understand what this season is all about, right? So that is where we're going to take this next set of conversations. And we also talked about, and I'm going to bring this back up again, there is a critical need for a belief shift. And we're going to lean into that. We leaned into it the last few weeks. We're going to lean back into it in the coming weeks as well. There is a critical need for belief shifts when it comes to assessment. The old belief that testing is stressful, it is high stakes, it is disconnected. The new belief has to be that testing and assessments can be a moment of agency, reflection, and ownership. That is the shift. And that is why I want to talk about drift and I want to talk about drive. So that's where we're headed. So the data challenge we have right now is we really are information rich, but I'm sorry, we are data rich, but we are information poor. What do I mean? There is data everywhere in schools, in districts, at the state level, at every level. There is quantitative data everywhere. We see it in formative assessments, in our summative assessments. Some of us have interim assessments. We see curriculum assessments. All of these assessments are opportunities to gain quantitative data about a young person. We know whether they can compare and contrast. We know whether they can add or subtract and the degree to which they can do that. We know whether they can handle complex text or they cannot. We have a lot of data. What we also seem to have is information. And I say information poor, not because we don't have enough information. I say information poor because we have a singular, narrow type of information. What we tend to lean into is the quantitative side of data. Um, as a researcher, we get quantitative data and qualitative data, or we take what's called a mixed methods approach to understanding outcomes and processes and all the things that we use. In education right now, we are relying a lot on the quantitative data. And what the quantitative data does is it gives us information about a moment in time. And what we need is a much more comprehensive understanding, particularly as the grades get older. I know in the younger grades, our sort of K3, K2 ish area, there's a little bit more space to get qualitative data. As students get older and the type of education shifts, the day, the way kids are educated across the day, we have subjects, kids are marshaled in 48-minute time slots. It makes getting qualitative data a little bit more of a challenge. And so we end up being data rich with lots and lots of quantitative numbers that tell a story about children, but they don't tell the whole story. Hence, this idea of us being information poor. And so, what data isn't? It really should not be judgment, right? It is not the full story, and it is not useful without context. You got to have context in order to truly understand and get the full picture of how the numbers came to be. And that's really important to really think through, right? We've got to be able to say, I have a number, and here's the reason why I got the number. So the quantitative side is going to give you what you have. The qualitative side is going to give you why you got that. And it's going to really help as an educator, particularly at the leader level, right? It's going to really be able to give you deep insights into some of the backstory as to what's driving the data that you're getting. And so then, what should it be? It should be a signal, not a sentence. That's what it should be. It should signal something. And it should signal something more about the adults as it does the children. Right now, when I've been in schools, I've been working with people. The sentiment happens when numbers come out and the numbers are not what we want them to be. Sometimes the qualitative response to that is to blame young people, is to say, well, the kids can't do this, their family is this, they come from this environment. We tend to export the qualitative information to external factors as though those factors are sort of embedded into the problem of the kid, as though the kid is inherently the issue. And I don't believe that. There are some things kids cannot do, but we tend to really, really systematize the issue of data, numbers to children's inability or their family's context. It should also be a conversation starter. It should not be a conclusion. That's why I say data is not the decision. Data is the beginning of a conversation that adults can have with young people. A lot of times those conversations are being had outside of kids. That's the power dynamic. That is the power imbalance that we see regarding assessments and testing. And what we want to do, what we need to do is to level that out and really help young people begin to be strategic around their own assessment and help them be reflective in their practices. That is why the data, the numbers really are a starting point, not the end point. They're not the decision point necessarily, right? And then it should be a tool to plan. The numbers that we get ought to serve as tools to plan, reflect, and build a responsive instruction. We really want to be able to help young people if we say students are at the center. We say it a lot: student centered education, student centered learning. If students are not part of the assessment piece, they're not fully part of the process of education. The power dynamic has got to shift. The power experience has to shift so that young people become partners in the process. And all too often, they are not. So, how do we go from data rich information poor to driving? Here we go. We know that the drip is data facts, right? These artifacts. We get the graphs, we get the reports, we get all of the outputs that tell us whether a child is proficient, whether they are advanced proficient, whether they are emerging, right? But then we want to get the drive pieces. How do we become data responsible? What does data responsible even mean? It means, as a district, particularly, right? Because it's going to start at the district level. As a district, what's the timing mechanism of the data? What is the real purpose of the data? Are you having interims as well as formatives and summatives? Where's the role of how young people can be part of that conversation? That's a testament to really whether or not you think a child should be at the center or not. We have a lot of people talking for kids, right? So that's data responsible. And then the communication side of data responsibility. How will you communicate? How will you help the child first, beyond here's your number, again, beyond just the number, to helping them build their power sensibility and become partners? How will you communicate to them? How will you communicate to their families? Right? And then what are you going to do with it? And then on the drip side, information is score based. On the drive side, you want to be responsive. Yes, you want to get the score, right? You want a number because the number is the starting point. But what you want to have is the qualitative match. That is why I was giving out those tools over the last few weeks to really help build the qualitative story to align to the numbers so that, again, the power shift can happen and young people become partners. And then it is reactive. We want there to be an instructional focus using the numbers, understanding the qualitative factors, and then creating an instructional focus that really brings the two of them together. It becomes reactive, and we want there to be value in it. A lot of times, young people don't see the value in the assessment or the test. We have quizzes, we've got end of chapter tests, we've got book tests, we've got the formatives and the summatives. We have all these tests, and the brain is overloaded and is checking out. We need to make sure that young people have the data information they need. There's a lot of talk these days about building financial literacy, and it's the right conversation. We also need to have a talk about building young people's data literacy. We talk about building the data literacy of educators. We need to do the same thing for young people. If we want young people at the center, if we want there to be a power shift experience, we definitely need to build young people's data sensitivity and build their data literacy. That's going to be a surefire strategy to ensuring they stay in the mindset, that their minds are there, that they are present when these assessments come down. And then on the drip side, it's very top down. It is a top down prospect, right? And we know that. We understand that. On the drive side, it is equity and empowerment focused. Equity because it builds each student's capacity in a way that meets their needs. If you're in a place where equity cannot be said, then don't use the word equity. But drive is about students' equitable understanding of this process of assessment. Use the word empowerment. It's going to hit in your context the way it needs to hit. So we want to move from the drip side to the drive side, really making sure that we are responsible with our data. We are responsive to the data, that it is instructionally focused, it is valuable, and it builds equitable and empowered knowledge so that students really can do their best. There isn't a kid alive who walks into a building and says, "Today's the day I don't want to do my best." However, we hold back far too much information, far too much strategy that can build their power and help them become the kind of partners in their education we all say that we want to have. So that's how we go from drip to drive. So, what are the power moves involved in that? What do? Number one, got to gather your data, get the numbers, but then you also need to have this understanding of the qualitative side. And next week, we're going to talk about how to get some of that more qualitative data. And then when you get your numbers, want to understand the numbers. You need tools that are going to help you at the aggregate level, meaning the total level, all students in the group in the pot together. But then you want to get some group dynamic data, which is through the disaggregated levels, where you're understanding and learning about the different groups of students. Notice I didn't say subgroups. I don't like the term subgroups. We should stop calling kids part of subgroups. I know the federal government uses it, doesn't mean you have to. Instead of saying subgroups, just call them groups, just call them student populations. I digress. Anyway, that's how you start. Gather your data, get both the aggregated total levels and really get into the student group disaggregated level. Okay. Some critical questions to ask yourselves. What story is the data telling me? The numbers are going to say something, they're going to tell you something. And the other question you want to ask yourself is, what is my qualitative data suggesting that is the driver of these numbers? If you don't have a qualitative understanding, that's an opportunity. It's a door for you. And then another question, what's missing? What's missing? Even though the brain doesn't always look for the missing tool, you're going to have to force yourself to dig into what possibly might be missing in your data, right? And then one of my favorite questions to ask is, what would the students say? What's going to be their reaction? How can you have a conversation with young people around the data? And this may sound very classroom oriented, but if you're a leader in a building and you have a school leadership team, and that school leadership team does not have a student representation, I'm going to ask you to rethink your concept of student centered learning. When the data comes out and you gather your school leadership team, I would challenge you to be sure there are students at that table as well, so they can be part of this conversation. You want to talk about students at the center? Here's a surefire way to get them at the center. Specifically, directly, intentionally build their data literacy. Invite them to be part of your SLT, your leadership team. Help them help you understand what could be driving those underlying data points. And that's really important to consider. That's those power moves. So, data stories, right? Disaggregate by student groups. It helps us. It moves beyond averages that mask disparities. You got to have that, right? It wants to target with clarity and clear and care. Be careful, be intentional. And then it designs instruction that meets real student needs. That is why data stories at the qualitative side are really, really important to have. So, the student perspective. Why does that matter? I just said, but here's why it really matters, right? When students see and understand their data, they gain agency. Data is a way to gain agency, right? It becomes a tool for their reflection, not ranking. We've got to get out of this ranking. If we say students are at the center, not every kid responds to ranks. I know that we have a college system, and when we get into high school, we got to rank them so you can get into the best college and all the numbers. Maybe we should be asking ourselves a different question about that. Is that really the humane thing to do with kids? And then shared analysis can build trust. We want young people to build trust. This power shift experience through assessment is really critical, and it can happen if we take a different way of understanding and seeing the process. So that's what we have for today. Your next steps. Your first next step, make sure you get the book, right? Get the book. There is the QR code. If you go to our website, you will have a way to actually get a signed copy of the book. It'd be a pleasure for me to sign it for you and get that out to you. Go ahead. That's your first next step. Your other next step, a couple of reminders. Here's your reminder next step. I want you to give me a comment. Let me know what you thought about today's session. Subscribe, and then please share. And then again, reminder, let's keep talking. You want to really dig into shifting the power dynamic in your learning environment using assessment as one avenue towards that. Go ahead, scan that QR code. Also, you can go on the website and let's get on a call together and chat about how to really shift the power dynamic using assessments as a tool in your learning environment. And then I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great rest of the week, and yours in power, Dr. Tanji.